Well, everyone, welcome back. Let's continue to talk on how we can all build a greener city, country, and of course, the entire world. Ladies and gentlemen, our next panel present here today will be deliberating on accomplishing the mission net zero for commercial real estate. Without further ado, because we are tight on time and I respect each and everyone's time out here, we're going to be moving on to introducing our panelists and our moderator. First up, I'd like to invite the Managing Director, GBCI India, Senior Vice President, Research and Innovation, US Green Building Council. We're talking about Mili Majumdar, who's going to be joining us as our session chair. Well, Mili, being an architecture graduate and building technology specialist, has had more than 3 decades of experience in the field of energy and environment with a focus on sustainable developments of habitats. She's also a member of the Committee for Formulation of Energy Conservation Building Codes for India, member of Committee of Bureau of Indian Standards for Revision and Updating of the National Building Code of India. Thank you so much, Mili, for joining us today and being a part of our conversation. Well, it is now time for me to call upon our esteemed speakers. First up, Sustainability Lead Officer, Mindspace REIT, DGM, ESG and Sustainability K, Raheja Corp. We're talking about Anubhav Saxena. Let's warmly welcome Anubhav. Somebody who drives the sustainability initiatives across the commercial and residential businesses of K, Raheja Corp. He works closely with the industry bodies to ensure compliance to the green norms for every new edifice. He's somebody who's, of course, championed the partnerships for the group companies with the climate group. Let's warmly welcome Anubhav. Thank you so much, and let's once again give him a warm round of applause. Joining Anubhav on the stage is going to be next up, sustainability coach, net zero education expert. We're talking about Deepa Parekh. Deepa, with over 16 years of experience specializing in the building sector, as a sustainability consultant, helps clients meet the net zero goals for building design and operations. As a trainer, she's conducted more than 55 professional and corporate training programs on various topics. Thank you so much, Deepa, for honoring us with your presence. Next up, joining would be Associate Director, Development Management, RMZ Corp. We're talking about Isha, Anand. Isha brings an integrated design approach for architecture and sustainability at RMZ Corp. She's somebody who's leading the ESG reporting and initiatives of the organization. She's also helping on some of the dual initiatives as it looks to diversify to other asset class. Thank you so much, Isha, for joining us today. Next up is going to be the Head Operations West Region Embassy Services Private Limited, Karandeep Singh, Nanda. Karandeep handling 25 plus million square feet under his portfolio for IFM and PAM, and is responsible for managing the CRM, financial management, P&L analysis, driving operations with cost-effective solutions, building value adds, and of course, today going to add a lot of value to our panel as well. Let's give him a warm round of applause. Thank you, Karandeep, for joining us. And next up, the Managing Director, Strategic Consulting, Cushman and Wakefield, India. We're talking about Khurshed Gandhi, who's going to be joining us. Well, somebody who brings almost 18 plus years of experience in providing real estate advisory services across the country, has extensively worked on projects with diverse client categories. We're talking about across Africa, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Thank you so much, Mr. Gandhi, for joining us, and let's warmly welcome him once again. With that being said, we're tight on time. I'd leave it to our session chair to take it forward.
Oh, no. Hello. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. No, the energy is low. Good afternoon. Okay. I know it's a very difficult session post-lunch, but, we have a very, very eminent panel here. And we also know that how important net zero is, discussion is in current context, and everyone out here are looking for ways and means so that we can not only achieve goals of net zero emissions in our respective work, portfolio, buildings, and the sector as a whole, but also how to maintain it and, see the intersect with the decarbonization pathways, with other also very important issues around how to finance it, what are the implementation challenges, what are the intersect between resilience, equity, health, and so many other things. And we have a very eminent panel here, so I'll just kind of put some context to the discussion here. We all are aware that, there is a global agenda and commitment for different countries around meeting net zero goals, net zero emissions. And we also know that India has committed to be net zero, kind of emissions by 2070. Definitely, if you are looking globally, the energy-related emissions from the building sector is also pretty high. We talk about 40% emissions from the building sector, but that, per se is also only the operational energy which we are talking about. If we take into account the embodied emissions, that it will be even much more, because we know also steel and cement, which are the two key ingredients of driving the real estate sector, also contribute to nearly, 8% of emissions. So overall, there is a very large role of the real estate sector and commercial real estate to drive the net zero agenda. And we are also living in times where there is a lot of uncertainty around climate change. Hence, there is an overarching agenda around building resilience, around health of people, equity, and so many things. And also, we are having the ESG agenda that drives most of the corporate communications, and there is a lot of focus around that. So all of these things are applied to same set of properties. So that means that there are a lot of, kind of intersecting issues and lot of things to be handled together in an integrated way. And we have a very eminent panel consisting of architects, facility managers, portfolio managers, advisors to the real estate sector, and also large, portfolio clients who not only manage their own properties, but also look at properties of other corporate clients. So firstly, we will begin by, hearing alphabetic. So our panel, and I must say the organizers, I must thank them for putting together such a balanced panel in terms of gender. So that's also very unique, I think, here. So we'll begin first by, 2 to 3 minutes introductory comments from each of the panelists on how they're moving towards net zero emissions in their respective area of work. And here I would also request them to focus on one thing, because, here we talk about net zero as a very loose term, and it means very different to different people. Sometimes, for ease of our and benefit of our own work, and, how we want to also show compliance, we include or exclude things, because there is no defined, scope per se in the industry so far. So I would request all of the panelists to talk about what they understand or how important it is for them in their context, and how they define it, and what are the goals they have set for themselves. So I'll start, from you here.
Hi. So the definition, as we seen in the morning, that some of the session, that the net zero concept itself is very complicated. That it's have very each and every company, each and every sector is having their own interpretation for the net zero. So the traditionally, like 10 to 12 years back, when we first heard this concept of net zero, we used to think that net zero means if a net zero building, the building where whatever it is going to consume, the same amount of energy it should generate. So we used to think that all the possible generating measures or renewable measures need to be there at the on-site. It has to be designed on the building rooftop. So theoretically it looks fine, but when we started applying this concept practically for a large commercial building, it doesn't make any sense, because we don't have that much space on the roof. Then the definition get again got changed, and slightly over the period of time now, there is introduction of the green power. You can take the benefit of the green power. If the space is not there at your building, you can take the offsite renewable energy. Then it's true that we have to first make a lean design. We have to make energy efficient building, then have to apply for on-site renewable energy. Then we have to go for green power. But then they also realize that this also have some limitations. We are still not making that 100%. Then they started accepting the carbon offset projects. So over the period of the time, the concept of net zero is getting involved, and more and more things also getting added, just like Mili said, embodied carbon. So net zero could be different for a net zero definition again could be different for a project level, also for an organization level.
Talk about your how Raheja Group is looking at net zero in terms of.
So Raheja Group since now we are looking as not as one project, we are looking as an entire organization. Since we have ESG commitments, so we have to define a net zero target. So so net zero target means that we have to balance or we have to nullify all entire scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 emissions. We cannot rely on just on scope 1 and scope 2. We also have to see scope 3 emissions, which handles the embodied carbon. So that's a very important thing. And since the group like us, especially for Mindspace RIT, which is handling a lot of commercial building, approximately 60 commercial building we are handling. So in that case, we divide this roadmap into two sections, like for existing building and for the futuristic building. For existing building, we have to use a structured map. It's not like we are going ahead and directly declaring it like after 5 years we can make it net zero. It cannot happen. So we have to go step by step. So what we did that we have to first we established the baseline. The baseline was FY 1920. And once we established the baseline, we started developing internal benchmark. See, right now we all are having the sustainability building codes, IGBC, USG, all these councils are there. But these are all external parties. It's very important to establish internal benchmark for the KPIs. So then we started studying our buildings, our tenant profile, durations, operating hours of the tenants. Then we realized the internal benchmark is different as compared to the external available benchmark. Then we started aggressively setting the KPIs like energy intensity, water intensity for the existing building, and then whatever the lessons we are learning for the existing building.
You are applying that to the new.
Yeah, we are applying that to the futuristic
building. So we'll come back to
building.
to hear more. So, Deepa, over to you. I know you are kind of leading the advisory services and teaching, and you are also looking at a lot of skill gaps. So if we have to meet all the objectives of net zero, so please tell us from your experience what is your role and how you're driving,
Sure. Thanks, Mili. Yeah, I really believe education can be a force for good. And, just by having awareness of what needs to be done for net zero, it can trigger capacity building. So I see two things in my practice and then what I bring into teaching / training as well. One is a supply side, one is a demand side. Demand side are all developers, clients asking for net zero developments. And the supply side is the workforce which will actually help implement this. Now both sides need to have awareness about what does net zero mean for their respective domain. And having that awareness, they then will actually consider capacity building as something crucial and necessity. Once that happens, then we can see a ripple effect in the organization where you can actually drive this top down in the organization or bottom up if the workforce is skilled enough to work on green buildings. The projects that I have been part of, wherever the outcome has been exemplary, I have seen the overall awareness of the entire team is at a different level as compared to the other business as usual projects. So they are able to really influence the outcome, both from a project implementation side and even questioning the brief. And the client is also very receptive to it. So if that basic awareness is not there, then I think it's very difficult. Then we start looking for incentives and other external kind of factors to influence net zero. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So, I think it's a very, good time that Isha, we will hear your, inputs, because we have heard about the KPIs being set and we have heard about, how awareness generation and skill is very important. And you being an architect from RMZ, you look at both the supply and the demand side of things, right?
Yeah.
So how do you kind of, look at it? And if you can also again focus on the basic question about defining your net zero targets and goals, and also how you are able to bridge that gap
Sure.
between your supply side and demand side from the design perspective to performance.
Absolutely. So obviously, I think as we've been talking, the net zero goals for us are split. Okay. The net zero goals for us are split between operational as well as embodied carbon. Operational, obviously, design plays a major role when we're designing our buildings, that they have to be designed in the most optimized manner, right? You're using the right resources, you're designing them efficiently, not only through active measures, but passive measures also. Design has a lot of strength. When you just have to apply common sense sometimes. It's not about putting in like rocket science into it. So I think that's where a designer's role comes when it comes to designing optimized, efficient buildings. And thereby you can reduce your operational carbon and the energy which is being consumed by the building. So obviously there's a lot of focus on that. We are measuring the energy intensities of our assets. I think the older portfolio sits at about 135 EPI. I think going forward, we're targeting that to bring it sub 100, which I think is a bit of a challenge in multi-tenanted building. I think for self-use buildings and residential, I think it's a slightly easier task, but when you don't know who your end user is, it becomes a challenge. And that's what we're trying for, and bringing it sub 100 is what we're looking at very intently. I think other than that, I think what the development of the renewable energy sector has really helped us a long way. As of last month, we've transitioned our entire Bangalore portfolio to green power wheeling, which is great, like a 5 million square feet of assets in Bangalore. Completely 99% operations is on green power in a combination of wind, hydro, and solar. So I think on the operational front, between design optimization, efficient operations has been key in achieving that. In terms of embodied carbon, I think a lot of data is missing, in terms of benchmarking. What's the starting point to measure your embodied carbon? How do you measure where you need to get to? So that's an exercise that we're doing, that we need to establish our benchmark first, and then we'll look at improvements, like looking at replacement of cement. How do we look at putting in construction demolition waste during construction? How do we look at green steel? So that's something we're working towards, and as an effort towards that, we've become a signatory at the First Movers Coalition, where we're looking to reduce our embodied carbon because of cement and concrete, which actually ends up being the largest part of our construction. So that's the way we're looking at. And I think the most important thing I'm looking at, especially through forums such as this, is collaboration. I think between Anubhav and Karandeep, we're from the same sector, but we are competition as well. How do we collaborate in the best possible way? Because I think a lot of things that we end up putting into our building is because of the kind of end users that need to come, and we're competing for the same people. So obviously, you kind of overspec your building and over-design your building. Instead of looking at ISHRE and some of the adaptive comfort ranges, you go as per ASHRAE, because if you don't tick that box, you're out of the race, right? So how do we as an industry collaborate to set those standards? I think that's something I'm looking forward to through this forum.
That also brings, to Deepa's point about awareness and the client awareness on, demanding for that.
Absolutely.
So we have heard from the Raheja group, from RMZ. Now over to you, Karandeep, the embassy's point of view on the same topic. How, and if you can focus on the difference, like we have heard different perspective, that will be interesting for that.
So from embassy point of view, I think we are more focusing on renewable energy, and like we have a 100 megawatt power plant in Bellary, where the complete energy wheeling is done. And more than 80% of our tenants in Embassy Manyata in Bangalore, they are getting the through this green power. So that is also one of the reasons why more tenants are actually coming to us, and they're also long-term contracts with us. And secondly, from an embassy point of view, we are focusing more on technology, especially in metering devices like IoTs and all, because there you can track your energy consumptions very closely and you can work on it. And with our customers, we are focusing on effective waste management practices. We are trying to reduce the landfill rejects. We are keeping some benchmarkings in our KPIs for that. I think more effective parking management, traffic management is very important today, because if you have those traffic jams within your commercial parks, in a way that is also increasing your carbon emissions. And I also feel that we are also doing a lot of programs in terms of encouraging employees to have a more sustainable diet program and going towards a better, you can say, lifestyle. While we know that there is sometimes resistance which basically comes from that, but overall, these are some key areas which we are working. And when we are getting new contracts, especially for facility management, and the KPIs have to be closed, mutually discussed with our customers, we are trying to formulate the KPIs which are related more to sustainability also, whether it is your water consumption per capita, controlling that, or having targets which are set for consumption.
So you make the tenants meet those KPIs
Yeah,
as
yeah,
a part of the tenant agreement?
So
which you do?
mainly from a common area point of view, we do it. So we can't force the tenants always, but from a common area point of view, while there is some percentage of power consumption which is consumed through the common area also, and the HVAC consumption. So we are trying to make those targets where we can effectively reduce the landfill rejects, we can have reduction in the power consumption, and even we are managing these chiller plants, and also there, if we can have a better control over the efficiencies, whether it is in IKW/TR. So those are some of the initiatives which we are working with our customers, because there are a lot of practices which together will help us to reach this goal
Correct.
of net zero.
Yeah, so very interesting viewpoints. I'll come back to each of you later. So KG, over to you, from Cushman, Wakefield.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, can you guys hear me? Okay. So, I mean, there's a lot that we can talk about, but essentially my firm deals with everything from advice to implementation, right? We are the service provider on the actual implementation side. We work backwards into advice. So what I'll do is, and there's a lot that's been said here, but let me throw out numbers to you, because I'm a numbers guy, I like numbers, okay? So first out, real estate, and Mili mentioned this, right? Accounts for 65% of all cement consumption in India. You get steel, that's higher. 40% of all carbons that come into the environment, 40 to 45% is real estate based. India today sits at about 1.3 billion square feet of space across commercial. That's about 700 million square feet. You've got retail, hospitality, and of course, industrial. When I say industrial, I mainly mean warehousing, because that's investor owned, right? And this is investor spaces. I'm not talking about the campuses and so on and so forth, which is another billion square feet. Why is this important? Because the government mandates and these esteemed people on the panel are driving change today through those places, right? However, for the 700 plus million square feet of space on the commercial side in India today, there is almost 10 times as much residential space that nobody is really tackling the problem on anything remotely resembling ESG. Yes, certain governments have mandated rooftop solar, but that's eyewash and we all know it. So let's talk the power problem, right? Because we said we'll all sort this out and say we'll put up renewables. Our target by 2030 is to put up 500 gigawatts of renewable power. Our current installed capacity as of March of this year is 417 gigawatts, of which renewables has dramatically spiked, by the way, and is about 140 gigawatts. So there's a big gap for renewables to cover to get to that 500. By the way, our demand is close to about 700 gigawatts that we know of, because there's a lot of power that's not being consumed. So what are we doing, right? So it's great to talk about, real estate, but the ground reality is it's a much larger problem. It's a behavioral problem. It's a you and me problem. And we need to sort that out pretty extensively. And the only way to do that, and you mentioned this, quite thing, is to get educated about it. We're doing it today because we're mandated. Globally, if you look at how it's moved, it's a mandate, then it moves into being risk, and then it moves into being profitability, and I'll quantify that. So right now in India, we are being forced to do BRSR for the top 1,000 listed companies, both financial, non-financial indicators, right? This is compliance, tick box approach. You're doing the first bit of that. The second bit, which is risk, is What's happened to Goldman Sachs? What's happened to Deutsche Bank? They paid fines for greenwashing. They've had the CEO fired. So that's happening. And then there is the bit on profitability, right? A lot of companies realize if they're green and they've green their value chain, they make money. It's actually happening, and it's not eyewash. IBM, as a case in point, has moved its facilities from outside New York right in the middle of the city, right? They're paying 4 times the rent for a building that's about half the size. But it was the only ESG compliant building from the onset. And mind you, it was an old building, embodied carbons. So that starts making a difference. So it's not a straightforward problem. And I think, and I'll just end here, the biggest problem today that we need to quantify is data. And if you can sort that out, ESG becomes easier.
Yeah, and I think, all of you together brought out very important issues, if I can summarize it very well. One, it came out that, skill is one of the very important thing. And what I could gather is, again, that net zero, yes, is a wish, but everybody is grappling with their own definition. Somebody is focusing on renewables, somebody is focusing on demand side, but the overall net zero emission target, I'm not sure if it is still within the entire portfolio. And there is, the skill gap. There is this intersect which we spoke about between equitable distribution, within the resilience of climate threats, and also lifestyle and other things. So now, and we also spoke about data, right? So unless data drives a lot of our decision making, and this is also an age of AI, IoT. So, if we get to the next round, again, I'm not throwing this question to any particular person. How do you see, because also when you are designing buildings which would be net zero probably in future, you would also be driven by data from your existing stock, right? So as major developers, as, space aggregators or advisory or, skilling agents, how do you look at data and, evolving role of IoT, AI, etc., to drive future decisions towards net zero? And another thing, maybe if you can also, help me to understand, I heard about carbon offsets from you, that's again something very controversial. If you really look at SBTI, the methodology, they do not recognize carbon offsets. So you are really looking at, more hard investments on renewables on yourself rather than something which is elusive and not, that way verifiable. So that also leads to a lot of greenwashing. So if you can throw some lights at portfolio level, how you are leveraging data and how really you are making these goals actionable, which your clients can also visibly see and which also you can quantify, vis-a-vis not greenwashing. So if you can, if we can hear from that. Anyone can take the question, then I'll specifically ask.
So basically, I think that when we talk about data, first of all, the reporting of today, the emissions and all, there is no standardized metrics basically. I think somewhere some standardized metrics have to be used, which is uniform across maybe industry-wise. I think that is one important point. And second is that when we are setting the target, we actually talk on a very broad level that by 2070 we will achieve net zero. But are we setting some short-term targets also for us? I think that is also very important. And we need to have some kind of benchmarking. Plus, also what I feel is that, and I've seen this also, that when you are reporting this data, do you have a third-party verification on that? Because something has to be transparent, right? So we need to also have a system of verification.
So do you look at certification,
So we do it with our clients. So we promote that with our clients basically. But I think more than that, we are now promoting short-term targets. Yeah.
Anybody else would like to?
So I think there are two things in the kind of experiments, and since we own a certain portfolios, we often use them as laboratories to figure out certain things. I think one thing we've been trying to do is some form of spatial mapping. What are the most used spaces and which are the least used spaces? And in the next project, let's not build those spaces, right? I think that's step one. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, as long as you're building, there is a carbon footprint. I mean, there's no denying in that when we have to build, otherwise we won't have jobs. So I think that optimization is something that we need to look at. What's the minimum you need to build to get the project going? Unnecessarily large food courts with large seating, do you even need to build that, right? You can have a phased approach for lunch breaks, etc. So I think step one is optimization, what you're building. And we're trying to do that, what's the bare minimum we need to build by reevaluating our assets and how people are using those spaces. I think one is that. And second is on the whole energy consumption aspect, just studying that pattern and looking at all the anomalies. When does it go higher? When does it go lower? And also, unfortunately, calling out certain end users because person A is using the building a certain way and person B is using the building a certain way. So I think calling them out, not rudely, but politely, that that they need to get their act together.
If I can go next. Okay. So I want to just address data and the greenwashing bit. One is on the academic side. In general, how you use data-driven design approach or evidence-based design approach in designing buildings. That is one way to not just be aware of what you're designing, but also to avoid greenwashing. I'm an advisor, reviewer, and a mentor with Solar Decathlon India. This is one of the largest student design competitions to design net zero buildings. And here, the entire goal is to show evidence-based design. And how do you really arrive at net zero? There are 10 contest areas, and they are all very rigorous, aligned with what should happen in practice. And through this 9-month-long competition, students learn about the basic fundamentals, which then they have to apply and actually come up with their design. So in the end, they are actually showing evidence to how they're building. Of course, it's on paper, but how it is, net zero. So now when these graduates come into the profession, they are already skilled at a certain level, and
Absolutely.
they will question greenwashing. So this is one way. And the other way in practice is to actually train architects and design professionals to use evidence-based design approach in their practice, integrated into the process of the way they design buildings so that they are also more aware of what exactly they are designing for. When that happens, I have seen architects get very confident in talking to the clients. They know how to present their design well. They just don't take no for an answer. But those who are not sure what's going on in the design, they rely on consultants to tell the story, and then they lose the game, right? Sometimes it's too late, consultants are not hired the first person on the design. So really relying on evidence-based design and at the same time using your intuition as well. It's not just blindly following numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think data and also performance monitoring to see what you're designing for is actually happening in practice. And, people who are occupying the building are also deriving value of that. That is also very important. That also I see a disconnect between people who design and operate buildings and people who actually occupy and use it.
Yeah. So when we talk about the data at the project level and organization level could be very different. Data science and data analytics plays a very much important role if any organization want to achieve a net zero goal. Like in our case, we are having 60 buildings. We have just developed a library of KPIs. It's almost 200 KPIs at the building level. Now, just imagine 200 into 60 KPIs, it's approximately 1200 parameters. It's not possible a person to visualize and analyze this data. So that is why the data science concepts, we have to create interactive dashboards so that the management plays also very much important role in driving this entire net zero. So they should understand this complicated problem in a simplified manner. That's a very much plays an important
Do you
role.
interact like all the developers? Because all of you have a lot of data, right? Do you interact to share data? No. Or it's like, no.
No, so our ESG reports are
Yes.
pretty much available at the public
But you know,
forum.
the
So
raw
I think
data.
it's through that.
Yeah,
but
Kedia,
obviously the
over to you.
background work
Sorry,
is never
this
shared.
is a bit of so I will, let you speak on this also.
The answer is not yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
We're hopeful that the data lake is created, but the ground reality today is developers tend to be, any entity, right? Internal data is internal data, right? You don't share it because there's a lot of confidential client data that goes into it as well, right? And whether you like it or not, in the space that the developers are at, a a lot of the clients don't want that data shared, whether they like it or not. Fortunately, it's moving increasingly towards being smart, right? So there's a lot of smart metering, you are putting things out there. And I think as it goes along, as we learn more, and we start pushing that data out, because awareness is critical to that, right? Organization awareness is also critical to that. Once that starts happening, it'll build. But it is not, it's very easy to put the mala around the neck of the developer. The ground reality is they're also limited. And at the same time, the onus lies on them to push for that. So it's a responsibility and a duty.
But I think one good practice what is happening in last few years is at least with such type of sessions, awareness, even media awareness, your NGOs are also coming, they are also giving a lot of awareness. I think there is a lot of sharing of best practices today between tenants, developers. I think that is also adding value.
But I do see a very less data-driven, like what you said about evidence-based design, etc. So we talk at a much, 30,000 feet level of do this, do that, which is pretty much well known that what, the efficiency space has developed pretty significantly. We know what to do, but then application of that, the challenges around that, and what people have gathered by applying it, that is missing. And that's what I'm talking about, data sharing.
On that note, Mili,
Yeah.
I think this gap, like you mentioned, is there because, first of all, if you want data in the future, you need to plan it during design.
Correct.
The intent has to be there. Say it's there, okay, you've put the sub-meters in, and then the design team is gone. Now, and the operations team is there. They don't even know why these meters are for. And then, maybe they would think that it is just to operate the building, lights, theek hai ki nahi, that kind of thing. And it's so limiting in the intent is also not carried forward. It's actually to make sure that certain design goal is maintained. But maybe the person operating the building probably doesn't know. Secondly, if they even know to operate the building, they don't know what to do with the data, which is like hourly data points. So many are there. What do you do with it? Analyzing that is another skill. And then understanding it and making sense of it and communicating it back to the person who's supposed to do something about it, that's a separate thing. So where do you have this one person who knows everything? It is not possible.
Correct. Yeah.
So if we work in an integrated way, which is an ideal situation, but that's what we would need, where we would know why this data is important, how do I take it and put it back, give it to the people who will do something about corrective action. Only then we will able to close this loop. So there is too much data, I feel. Sometimes it's just too much data. What do you do with it?
So, so that also brings me to maybe, before I open it out to for questions, one thing that we also have the compliance. I think all of you are reporting to SEBI for the, the compliance. There it's most of disclosure, that you're disclosing some basic data. And in this session, we are talking about setting net zero goals and achieving it, right? So at your organizational level, how do you ensure that that compliance, which is of course a regulatory requirement, is actually actionable into net zero goals, if you at all have it? How do you kind of convert that to something, and how do you monitor it over years? Do you have a shifting goal post around net zero because your properties are changing, their performance numbers are changing? So is there a shifting target around EPIs being revised, renewable being set? How do you bridge that gap between demand and the renewable to get to net zero? Yeah.
So ESG reporting is eventually going to end up like financial reporting. You're doing it on an annualized basis, right? Absolutely. Everybody's tracking it month to month. That's exactly what will happen. It'll happen day to day, month to month. It becomes a part of your culture, right? And a lot of it is being driven towards that. Now, data creation, I think the biggest problem is today people don't know enough. Don't know how to do things. That is changing. Please understand, ESG for us in India as
just
a hard
disclosure.
concept is 2 years.
Yeah.
It's just 2 years, right? And it's still self-disclosure. It's not there yet. It'll change as SEBI starts getting into it, as they learn. It's a matter of time. It's not if, it's when.
So I think, Mili, when we talk from a facility point of view, so with our clients, basically, we are monitoring some parameters in KPIs, like I mentioned earlier also. And also when the data comes to us, the right analysis of the data. For example, if I get, let's say, the EPI, what is the kWh per square feet? Am I relating it to the amount of footfall I'm having in that commercial park? and then am I relating it to how much water consumption per capita I'm consuming in the building? I think that analysis has to be done very stringently at a operational level, again at a management level, and then definitely at a strategic level. So I think so when you track it with the numbers, right, today you have some benchmarking numbers. Like when we talk about landfill rejects, everyone wants that there should be 0% landfill reject. But we are not able to do that because today, while we are segregating waste into dry waste and wet waste, but are you going to that last mile and seeing the vendor who has taken your waste weight and dry waste, is he also doing the same?
Correct.
It sometimes
so
does
that
not happen.
municipal collection. Yeah, sorry, I want the audience to interact, and so I really don't want to end up the time. Yeah, so maybe 20 seconds before I open up for questions.
Just one small thing on greenwashing.
Yeah.
How can we avoid greenwashing? Just that's a very important thing. How can we avoid the greenwashing? First, important thing to understand is sustainability is not a race. Neither net zero is a race. Right now, it's happening in the industry. Everyone is in a rat race. So if someone X is doing platinum, I also have to do the platinum rating. So we should start, and this push should come from GBCI or the certification course. They should also reward silver certification project. Though sometimes it's happened that due to the project design constraint or the practical challenge, the project has able to get the silver, but they have done the
Everything
genuine
is
effort.
rewarded, so that's silver. You can get to platinum later.
So but
that's
it's like
increment.
right now, they are just competition is there. Because of that competition, eventually people are trying to do the greenwashing. So maybe the education is a very much important thing. We need to educate the supplier chain. Also plays a very much important role if we want to really drive the net zero. Supplier chain plays a very much important role. So
Absolutely. I think supply chain, greening, the scope 3 part becomes also very, very critical. We have just 8 minutes more left, so I would yes, Alok. Question. Please
Hi, everyone.
identify who you are and the question also, and
Hi
keep it
everyone,
brief.
I'm Alok from GBCI, USGBC. So my question is to Isha or Anubhav. Like Karandeep mentioned, they engage with clients for ESG and sustainability. So at Embassy or Raheja, how do you guys engage with tenants and occupants to promote ESG aligned sustainable behaviors, if at all?
We normally, we started doing the green leasing. There's a concept called green leasing, in which the agreement is having all the green clauses, in which we are making the tenants aware about that we will going to monitor their data. We will going to educate the tenant at the initially, from the start itself, when we're starting this dialogue of the green leasing. So once the green lease plays a very much important role if you want to educate the tenants. Otherwise, and because if the tenants are not following the sustainability data, or they are not agreeing to the developer ESG goal, then we will be in the big trouble. So that is why, and then we keep on doing these tenant engagement activities. So maybe twice in a year we used to have this with the tenants. We normally give every quarter we give our ESG updates to the tenants. So the tenants are also aware about, and slowly we are pushing tenants to be also in the platform about the ESG. That is the only way which we can think of right now.
I think just to add, we are also doing a lot of energized programs today, where we are doing a lot of health camps and other things which we are doing along with the tenants. That is one way basically to promote it. And second, like I mentioned earlier, is in terms of renewable solar energy. So like we have some of our parks where we are providing more than 80% to tenants renewable solar power. So I think those are ways how we are we are promoting this. And also, at the end, it is also a cultural change. It is also an individual change today, right? So while we do all these practices, but it is also very important for the individual to accept it.
So I think similar approach, green leases, introducing those clauses, but I think done in a more collaborative way, puts a lot of mutual onus on each other. I think both are equally responsible. So the behavioral change is required from the tenant's perspective as well. So I think we are also looking at similar things. But again, I think from a tenant side also, there's a lot of awareness. All the larger companies have their own net zero goals and other sustainability goals. And we are part of the supply chain in a way. So there's a lot of demand from their side also as to how we need to behave to create their spaces.
So, you know what, when you said supply chain, sorry, I have one question. Do you have a supply chain, database where who are the suppliers for low carbon, zero emission product services?
So obviously, it's limited. We know who they are.
But it's building.
It's building up, I think. But what also is a challenge is you can't let one vendor monopolize, right? Because there is a limited supply chain, so you can't just have that. We need to have that open.
Now, as you're aware, in Europe, now they have introduced this border carbon tax, which will disable, kind of ones without having lower emissions to
And just
participate.
to add what she said, when we talk about behavioral changes, also there is a lot of government commitment which is needed when you are talking about net zero emissions. So from an individual perspective, while you definitely focus on adopting more sustainability initiatives and all, but as an individuals also, when you're voting, please also vote for individuals who are more prone to these climate change and who treat this, because we never,
the political will is
because
also
I've
very,
never
very
seen any
important.
political speeches.
Agenda.
They will talk about subsidies, they will talk about reservations, but they never talk about climate change.
I just want to add one little snippet, right? It's when you look at net zero, it's not only what you can see, right, and quantify. It's not just sustainability, energy, power, water. It's also DEI initiatives, right? Are your buildings good enough for blind people to use without help? Can people with us use
Diversity,
that,
equity,
right?
inclusion.
So
I'm
don't
just
forget that. That's a
expanding.
very critical piece of it. And at the end of the day, the building exists to serve the individual.
Absolutely. Any other questions? No questions? Sorry? Yeah, please. Yeah. Can we have the mic there, please? I think you have to close it, hold it closer.
This government of India has recently launched some green deposits and green bonds and all that. Is there any thrust from the real estate sector to enable the, these things to go on a faster to scale up this thing, because this is a finance aspect which is very necessary to deal with, because in any green initiative, finance upfront investment and all that becomes a big hurdle. So is there any tip from your side, from the real estate business leaders and all that?
Sure. So I'm not a finance expert, but I can just, like, from an architect and a sustainability perspective, I can see a shift and a demand from all the banks and our investors as well. There's a lot of demand from them that our portfolio should be green. They're looking at our ESG goals, they're measuring it up. One of our major investors, which is a Canadian fund, they have set their decarbonization goals and they're measuring our projects against that global benchmark. So we do see that shift, and that's going to influence how actually projects gets financed. That shift, just over the last year, I've seen a phenomenal shift, whether it comes from the banks or as well as investors.
Green financing is critical. The ground reality is in Singapore, and you will even look at Europe. There's a 0.5% difference in cost of capital acquisition. So that's a little more mature. It'll happen when it happens in India. There are covenants now to getting financed at a cheaper rate in India today, but we need a slightly larger arbitrage on a real estate project than 0.5%. But critical to this also is, remember, carbon credits and a carbon exchange that is healthy is pretty critical, because you're not going to be able to sort the renewables gap today or in the next 5 years or in the next 10 years. It's a big gap. You need the exchange to make sure that those who can't meet it, industries that can't meet it, use those to offset, right? Mining is a case in point of how you will never be carbon neutral, but you need those offsets.
Thank you so much. We had wonderful discussion. I think, thank you for participating. I hope you all enjoyed as much as I did. So we heard about, all the initiatives taken by the leading developers on moving towards net zero in the commercial commercial assets they have. We heard about the skilling gaps. We heard about, how ESG is intersecting with the net zero goals, the role of data, technology. and of course, so many other cross-cutting issues, and of course, the role of financing. So please, on behalf of the entire organizing team, give a big round of applause to our wonderful panelists. And thank you so much for being, such patient listeners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. With that, if I could have the honor of having the director of Xylo Paints, Kanan Krishnamurthy, to kindly join us once again on the stage and help us in the felicitation of all our panelists. So with that, can we have a big, big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our entire panel. And if you've liked the conversation, if you've learned it, I think it has to be a bigger round of applause. They've given us so much of key insights. Firstly, thank you so much, Mili, for joining us. Thank you so much, Anubhav. Thank you so much, Deepa, for joining us today. Yes, the applause can continue, absolutely, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Isha. Thank you, Karandeep. Thank you so much, Khurshed. And may we request all of you to come together as a group photograph. That's something we'd love to take back in our memorial lane. So ladies and gentlemen, let the applause continue for all of them. Now, of course, before we move ahead, okay, they would like, definitely Sapna needs to be a part of this photograph. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, a big, big round of applause.